Welcome to the official podcast of the Event Management Journal. I'm James Cannell. I'm here with my co-host, Professor Alan File. Hi, Alan.
Yeah, morning, James. Morning, Vaassilios. Really nice to see you.
Yeah, we've got Vaassilios with us here to talk to us about his latest article in the Journal of Event Management, studying event portfolios 2003 to 2023. So thank you very much for being with us today, Vaassilios.
Good morning,
I wonder
James.
if we could...
Good morning, Alan. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Maybe you could start off telling our viewers a bit about you and your current role, what you're doing at the moment, and perhaps a little bit about what your ongoing research is and what your research interests are, just to set the scene for us before we get stuck into your article.
Yes, I'm a scholar with broad research interests, cutting across the leisure, cultural, and creative industries. My work is highly interdisciplinary, exploring linkages among the leisure, creative, and cultural industries in order to incorporate the relative products and services into sustainable development strategies. My approach from this perspective is critically holistic, and I use mostly a complex systems perspective. So probably you have seen my work in different journals ranging from sport management to event management to leisure studies to heritage studies and so on. So I don't have boundaries speaking about that. Currently, I work as a freelance academic and also as a consultant in leisure services. And mostly I have been doing work, and this is most people know me, is about the work on my event portfolios. Which very briefly to tell you the background, I started with my doctoral work that I did back in University of Texas at Austin during 2003 and 2007. So that was based on an ethnographic study of a rural community in Texas. And this basically explains my persistence with event portfolio concept. I have to say here that my background is basically sport management. So I began with an interest in the management of sporting events and how we can maximize, how we can leverage the benefits of sporting events for host communities. But in my doctoral work, I found that in order to maximize the benefits of sport events, we have to think up beyond sport. And this means that we have also to combine the sport events with cultural events, with festivals, business events, and so on. That made me, I would say, very fanatic about the event portfolio concept as an integrative policy tool and strategic tool that can integrate the different disciplines that are doing research on events. And mainly we have the disciplines of sport management about sporting events, then the discipline of tourism that is doing more research on festivals. Then we have other disciplines that are looking more critical studies on events and so on. So I'm trying from an event portfolio perspective to be really integrative and to see how we can create synergies among all these different perspectives and all these different events and the different stakeholders.
Vaassilios, you sound incredibly busy, but with interesting work. It's really funny, Vaassilios. This morning I was up very early doing a presentation for people in Abu Dhabi, and it was on cultural tourism. So if I look a bit sleepy, that's why this morning. How would you say your work in sport tourism is maybe different to what's going on in like more cultural events and what have you? Is there any sort of real differences between the two?
Well, I think the first difference with the work that I do is that I emphasize the complex systems perspective. So I see that events are nested within overlapping systems. And these systems are from the broader external environment and also from the environment of the host community that influences events. So that's the challenge, the main challenge, in order to overcome the fragmentation that we have in events and also the silos, the knowledge silos that we create. And this is one of the dangers that I see, and with the sport tourism, but also with other fields, subfields that have been created. Film tourism, cultural tourism, and so on. So we create all these different subfields, and the danger is that this creates silos. And then we lose the big picture of how we can create synergies among these different disciplines when we are concerned about events. And then I do research on popular culture tourism. And then how we use the popular culture tourism, including creative industries, cultural products, and so on. Because this big picture is that where it can lead us, I believe, in sustainability and resilience. Fancy buzzwords that we use a lot, but really in order to achieve them, we need really holistic perspective. And this is what I'm trying to do.
And I think that's one of the really interesting things that I think comes through in jumping ahead of ourselves, really, in the conclusion of your article, is you talk about the importance of not just your research, but research that other people are carrying out using this portfolio concept for sustainability and resilience. I wonder if I can bring us back a little bit to the genesis of this article, really. What was it that made you think it now was the right time to write this? Why was now a good time to start reviewing the literature on portfolios?
Yes, the reason is really instrumental, to be honest. This article will accompany the curated collection about event management, about event portfolio. So I was asked to write a short commentary, which is not very short. Usually, when I start writing, I cannot stop.
I didn't find it short.
It's relatively short in comparison to other articles that I wrote. And by the way, there are already two reviews, extensive reviews about event portfolios that I co-written with Don Gedge, one published in tourism management and the other in contemporary hospitality management. So the real reason, as I said, it was for the curated collection, and more specifically, to identify all the articles that have been published in event management so far until today, and then to synthesize these articles with the broader research published elsewhere. And to see, what are the relative themes, what are the gaps, and how we can move from here. May I say here, what is interesting thing? Maybe this is another question later, but I think I should mention.
Go for it.
What is interesting here in this review, what I found? First of all, there are only 11 articles. Only 11 articles published in 20 years about event portfolios. 11 articles in event management published. Now, what is even more interesting is that one of the first articles that was published about event portfolios was in 2003. An article authored by Leo Jago, Lawrence Chalip, and other colleagues. That article was focused on destination branding, and it was based on either on workshops with destination stakeholders and event managers in Australia, which showed, based on their perspective, and this is important, the perspective of practitioners, it showed the importance of event portfolio. based on the logic that the single events, the standalone events, have only passing effects because they are temporary. So in order to make event benefits more sustainable and more long-term, we need a portfolio of events. We need multiple events. So 2003, when we find the next article, the first empirical study published in event management is after 10 years, in 2013. So we have complete silence from the event scholarship community for something that was really derived from stakeholders and from practitioners. And
why do you think that is? Why do you think it took so long for researchers to respond to that?
Yes, that's really huge topic. I can mention here how I can mention that in few words. I think the first thing here is that we have a methodological problem with events. How we approach events, how we treat events, and how then we manage events. The limitations that we have is that we have some traditions in event scholarship that really predominate and do not allow alternative perspectives. What are these traditions? The first is the tradition of reductionism, methodological reductionism and scientific reductionism that tries to create parsimonious models and then to be more, because we say events are an applied field, so we need simple models. And then this creates a tendency for simplistic fixed solutions to really complex problems. Okay, that means that, we need the reductionism leads us to take smaller pieces of events. And then we create the different subcategories of events. Okay, these are the sport events. Then in the sport events, we have the participatory events. We have the fantasy games, whatever, all different smaller and smaller categories. And with these smaller categories that we have, we do what? We extend the fragmentation, that already exists in events. Okay, it's a phenomenon that we cannot close our eyes. And this kind of fragmentation continues, which makes difficult for us at the end to have an holistic perspective. Okay, how we can synergize, how we can bring together an arts event with a sporting event.
Vaassilios, it's really interesting. But back in the spring, last spring, I taught a course at the graduate level called Destination Planning for Events. And we had, which was essentially what you're speaking about, but we had 4 destinations tuning in for case studies, 2 were international, 2 were in the US. And it was amazing how even experienced destination planners or experienced destination managers, they still viewed a lot of events in a very transactional form. Yeah, we need these multiple individual events because it's all about bed nights. And it's interesting how they didn't really see the collectiveness of a group or portfolio of events and the impact of that combined effort. It was really quite startling, actually. And I don't think it's just an academic thing, but the short-termism of events came through quite strongly.
Yes, and that's
a little bit worryingly in a sense, because ultimately they all feed into the broader destination.
Exactly, that's an excellent point, Alan. I have to highlight here the word that you used, transactional, because the transactional is very related with the solutions that we are trying to find, the simple solutions that can resolve our problems. And this is not always, we cannot always find recipes, simple recipes for making everything work. And this is also related with the tradition that we have to study mega events, major events. And this also leads us to what? To study single events. This is what I call singularism. So with the singularism, focusing only on one event as a case study, maybe an in-depth longitudinal study, but still this is one event only. Okay,
It's just one.
which, as I said in the beginning, the one event, even if it is the Olympic Games, has passing effects. It is not sustainable forever, long term. Okay, although we try to make it. So this singularism is a result of reductionism, fragmentation, transactionalism, as Alan you said, the focus on mega events, and then also the focus on legacy. This is another concept here that really takes us and keeps us on studying singular events. Because could we study legacies of multiple events? Not really. That in an event portfolio wouldn't make sense. Why? Simply because when we have a portfolio, what happens, what remains after the event is the next event. It's not the legacy. And the question is how we can connect and complement the benefits of the event that just finished to the other event, to the next event. Okay,
I think there's
yep.
I think that's really interesting what you're saying about legacy. What I've seen in a lot of research over the last 20 years has been this real engagement with the idea of legacy, because somehow it gives events research a kind of legitimacy.
Yep.
That we look beyond the event to what's happening in society or to other kinds of businesses or in tourism, to the detriment of research that focuses on the events themselves. And like you say, and the next event and other events, we tend to take an event and then go very broad very quickly.
Exactly. And the event portfolio is making, as I say in the article, is making a radical change, a disruptive change in how we think about events, because the events are not anymore ad hoc and temporary, because the event portfolio will be a permanent structure in the host community. Individual events will come and go, okay, but the event portfolio as a structure supporting events will be there. And this means also more jobs logically for the event managers, because if we have these structures, I hope, and logically this will be the case in the future, that cities will open positions for senior managers to oversee portfolios, event portfolios. And that's the stage.
And do you know what, Vaassilios? One of the things I'm thinking of here, a lot of event programs around the world are struggling for enrollment, but in many ways, perhaps we're teaching the wrong things, because I think a lot of event programs focus on singular event activity, when in reality, it's the bigger beast, which is more powerful. And I think on that note, could you say, did your findings surprise you at all? When you were writing this, did things come out that you thought, well, gee, I didn't really expect that? Was there anything a little bit different that came out that, was a little bit of a wow moment for you?
It didn't really surprise me, because I'm one of the people that really worked in the literature that I know all these years. However, the thing that I highlighted before, and it was something that I didn't realize, and it was like a wow moment for me, it was the 10 years. The 10 years gap that we had in event management from one of the seminal articles making clear the value of event portfolios, and then after 10 years to have the first empirical study in event management.
Yeah.
And also I need to add here that Don Geddes wrote first back at the late 90s. About event portfolios. He's the first who brought the notion, okay? So we're talking about more than 20 years that the event portfolio concept is around, but it's not taken, it's not embraced by the majority of the community of event scholars. There are, the things that I mentioned here are just a summary, because there is a huge ontological discussion that we could have. And actually, this is what I'm developing here for my next book that will be published next year of rethinking events. And this book, by the way, is in its exploration of a critique of why, for example, we study only single events. And then we don't have comparative studies. And I don't mean only comparative studies among portfolios. It could be comparative studies among different events, multiple events.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It could be about populations of events, whole populations of events. Nothing. There's only this thing, the same thing all over again of single events, the singularis. And
It sounds like this book will be really helpful, I think, because we're at that stage as a field. We're a very young field. We need to think about how we approach the field. Once we start talking about ontology, it suggests to me that we are reaching another stage, maybe in events management research, where we can take a step back and say, what have we achieved, and what do we do next? So, if I can ask you, Vaassilios, to look into your crystal ball, you've looked at the last 20 years of event portfolio research. What comes next, do you think? What's ahead of us, or ahead of you, in event portfolio research?
well, as I said, there is first of all the challenges that we have in the academic community with the traditions that we have. But I'm very optimistic because I see that the practitioners and in the field, actually many cities around the world and organizations, because portfolios can also be organized by companies, are moving to this direction. So I'm very optimistic that in the next years we're going to have further development of event portfolios. And actually that we will see and multiple portfolios organized in one location. Then I'm not sure, at some point the academic community will follow, but I'm not sure how long will take. It may be still a slow process. I'm not sure about that. However, in order to accelerate that, and Alan mentioned that before, is the curriculum. Something that we can start doing as event academics is to really refocus and rethink the event management curriculum, because what we actually teach today in most of the programs around the world is structured for singular events. This is what we teach to students, how to manage single events. And then the portfolio is mentioned, but as a secondary issue. What we need to do is to, from the introductory classes in event management, we need to introduce the event portfolio, and then we need to build the event portfolio in all the classes. Because every area, risk management, event design, event marketing, event policy, and so on, have implications and a different way of organizing a portfolio. So the event curriculum needs to change. Otherwise, if we still teach only single events, then at the end, this is what we're going to have. And at some point, there is going to be a reduction in the number of students in some programs. And there are going to be communities and cities, for example, like what happened in Victoria in Australia, cities that say, no, we don't want to host this large event. Like
Yeah.
Yeah. And Vaassilios, do you know what? It's really interesting. Just if I'm thinking from the US perspective, and Formula One. So Formula One is pretty new in the USA. So they've had the meetings in Miami, and then they had a very high-profile one in Las Vegas last weekend, which had all sorts of interesting dynamics to it. But if anything, I can just imagine the research coming out actually being very focused on the Formula One event rather than the collective. So when in reality, these are two huge event destinations. Yeah.
The collective thing here would be how we can build smaller events in order to enhance the experience of people and the benefits for the host community from the Formula One. Because in order to enhance the experience and the benefits, we will probably have additional events, okay, of smaller scale, of different nature, okay, because the point of the portfolio is to maximize the reach and the frequency of the events. So it's like we close our eyes, okay, and then we just see the one tree that is, for example, the Formula tree, and we don't see the complementary events that may add value. Why? Because they are smaller. Because we don't consider that this is so important. And sometimes, and I'm saying that because I'm coming from sport management, because sometimes this is not sport. And because we want to publish, for example, some from sport management, someone wants to publish in a sport management journal. Yeah, so the emphasis must be on sport events.
On sport. Yeah.
Okay, that's why we can see in the literature that many articles that have been published in sport management journals are about sport event portfolios, which actually don't see quite the holistic perspective. Okay, then we have also other events, but this is because someone wants to publish in a specific discipline that creates these boundaries. Okay, that's why.
If I'm going to fly the flag for the journal a second, I think that's a great thing about event management as a journal is open to submissions on multiple events, on different types of events, and I think trying to encourage scholars who would be primarily writing in sports journals or in tourism journals to dip a toe into the events management journals where there's a real openness to seeing these multiple perspectives. Because you're right, that's so important, because as researchers we end up not just in silos in our institutions but also in our publications and our research, I think.
Sometimes we just can't help ourselves.
Yeah.
So Vaassilios, on that note, what would be your advice? So Vaassilios, what would be your advice for a new starter? So somebody coming into the area fresh, new PhD student, they've got a great future ahead, one assumes. What would be your advice to them to maybe sort of broaden out and see things slightly differently?
Yes. First of all, to be more critical and try to see the inconvenient truths that we have in event management. And we discussed a lot today about some of these inconvenient truths. We have to accept that events are temporary. This is good and bad. Good because it's something special, that doesn't happen every day, but it is bad because it is transitory. Okay, it is just ephemeral. So if we start from here, accepting these inconvenient truths, then we can see how we can develop really an holistic perspective. And my advice here would be to try, of course, to publish in event management, in order to build and the foundations to promote the journal, but also to have really a transdisciplinary perspective. Because in the events, we are going to have in sport, we are going to have in the culture and arts and different elements that come from different disciplines. So the appropriate perspective is to be transdisciplinary, to go beyond the different disciplines and try to integrate them in specific contexts. That would be my first advice, and I think all the rest will come from this perspective.
Essentially, it's broadening our minds and really expanding the avenues, which is, I agree with you.
Exactly. Exactly, and also increasing the number of jobs and trying to make the event sector resilient, because it is really problematic. We use today, it's a catchy word, and everyone talks about resilience, especially after the COVID especially after the COVID pandemic. But it looks like that we haven't learned a lot from COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, because The events is one of the first things that will be affected negatively from a major crisis. And we live in a world that we call it today perma-crisis. Multiple crises all over the time. So in order to continue living on that, we have to create new models. And the new models mean, from a portfolio perspective, that we will have a strong structure that can support and network effects and subsidize different events when one event goes well and or another event doesn't go well, so that the sector and the events in one community can become more resilient. Now, if we continue doing research only on singular events, and I'm not saying we should stop, I'm just saying that we need also to expand. Ideally, in the next 10 years, to have 60% single events, 40% multiple events research. If we can see the picture, then this means that we can really change the sector and to make it more resilient. Only focusing on single events, we cannot really talk about sustainability, we cannot really talk about resilience. That's the inconvenient truth, I understand that, but we have to face it.
And Vaassilios, I think that's true across many disciplines at the moment. The inconvenient truth, it's always being a little bit more honest and looking in the mirror and seeing the reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On that cheerful note, can I bring us to I'll bring us to our last question, Vaassilios, which is something we like to ask everybody who comes on the podcast. Is there an article from the journal, or maybe from somewhere else if you want to be brave, but is there an article from the journal that you'll particularly recommend for our viewers to have a read of, something you found interesting or something that you think would be useful for them?
Shall I mention one article only or several?
Yeah, go for one. We can then put a link.
Preferably not one written by James or myself. That would be a little bit shameless.
Yeah, but we can put a link in the show notes.
There is one recent, very interesting article about COVID again that was very timely. That was from Welty Pizzi and co-authors about the event cancellations and how we can leverage the in-person event cancellations for optimizing benefits. And I think that's a really interesting case because it really addresses something really inconvenient that happens, okay, the cancellation of events and the crisis, but still how we can capitalize on such an occasion and then to really try to take advantage out of that and leverage that. I would recommend everyone, okay, to look at this article. It's a very good one.
Hey, thank you very much, and we'll put a link to that so that everyone can have a look at that, as well as obviously links to your article and some other information up there, so that our viewers can find out more about event portfolios and especially your article that has just been published. So thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today, Vaassilios. We really appreciate that.
Thank you